Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the course Global Communication. Today I am going to discuss with you a topic, Global Communication System. In this lecture, there is a question in my mind before I start discussion, that if there is such a thing as global communication, and what are its characteristics, or what would be its characteristics. It would contain worldwide receptions of international programs. This happens mostly when there are events that are interesting for society all over the world. The coverage of sports events like the Olympic Games, or political highlights like the opening of the Berlin Wall and the signing of the Oslo Peace Accord, were covered throughout the world. But such events are rare and therefore only a weak evidence for globalization and media development. Other characteristics are the development of media via satellite and the development of media markets in third world countries. Also, global information network via internet and news coverage from foreign countries. But news is problematic because it always gets evaluated through local and national ideologies. Before various interpretations from the same event are possible, media coverage is next to that always influenced by news values and news factors. Western news agencies are the dominant sources for news, and their decision is based on the question which events are interesting for Western audiences. Assumptions are that the probability of an event being processed as news increases with the journalistic's perceptions of geographical, political, or cultural proximity, with the surprise elements of the event, with the presence of conflict or disaster, or with the high degree of elite involvement. It is also questionable if global communication via mass media can set off a social change in these parts of the world. The media are mostly used by an elite. This is the part of the society which might not be done to give an impulse for social change, simply because it is a rather a small group of people who live in a financially and politically safe environment. The argument that foreign media bring social change by reporting about the situation in a certain country from a much more objective outside view, different from the coverage by the regional media, that in most cases are governmental controlled and part of a political domesticated media markets. It's not necessarily valid because the coverage about the situation in a country outside Europe or North America mostly only happens when there is a crisis. Besides this, it is not continuous. Reports every couple of years with nothing in between are not enough to set off any social change. Therefore, it is highly questionable if it is possible to achieve worldwide acceptance of democracy and human rights via media. There are three media systems around the world: the polarized pluralist model, democratic corporatist model, and liberal model. Here I am going to discuss first the polarized pluralist model. The polarized pluralist model occurs in countries that embraced liberal views of public speech and press later than most. This is most often due to a history of authoritarian regimes. Daniel, Helen, and Paolo Mancini explain this in their book. They wrote a book, its name is The Comparing Media System. Once these countries transitioned to a democratic government, political pluralism or the intervening of political entities in media organizations became the norm. Most or some characteristic of this model include that an elite-oriented press with a strong political focus. Another characteristic of this model is that they have a relatively small press circulations. The third characteristic is that regularly influence of the media by government, political parties, and wealthy business owners with political ties. The next characteristic is that a heavy emphasis is on commentary and advocacy based journalism. The next characteristic is that a weak emphasis is on journalism as a profession, as well as a restrictive stance on journalistic autonomy. Next is that a culture of strong ties between journalism and activism. The last characteristic of this model is that a prominent role of the state as owners and funders of media, but with limited capacity to regulate. Polarized pluralist system can be found in countries such as Greece, Italy, and Spain. The next media system is that democratic corporatist model. While the polarized pluralist model is common in Italy and Spain, the democratic corporatist model can be found most often in the north and central regions of Europe. This model is popular in countries that had early development of both the newspaper industry and freedom of the press. Notable to this system is that the capability of certain systematic elements often assumed to be in conflict. Strong state interventions of media exist along with a robust culture of freedom of information. Politically linked media and strong commercial media both fare well, and political pluralism can be seen alongside a tradition of high journalistic professionalism. There are different characteristics of democratic corporatist model, which are that the first characteristic is that it has a high newspaper circulations. The second characteristic is a strong history of political party newspaper. Next characteristic is a commentary oriented journalism. A growing emphasis on information oriented journalism and attempts at being both neutral and professional. The next characteristic is that a high degree of formal organization among professional journalists. The last characteristic of democratic corporatist model is that the view that media and a social institution for which the government has a responsibility. Countries where this model is common include Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Norway, and Switzerland. The third media system is the liberal model. This model is also called North Atlantic model. The liberal model is the media system found in the United States, Britain, Canada, and Ireland. These countries are notable for having developed early systems of free press and mass circulation. There are different characteristics of a liberal model, which include a domination of commercial newspapers, low political pluralism, and a strong professionalized journalism, but a lack of the kind of formal organization that exists in democratic corporatist model countries. Somewhat limited autonomy of journalists because of the commercial pressure of politics. The next characteristic is a limited role on behalf of the state. The second last characteristic of liberal model is that strong public broadcasting as well as public broadcasting regulations. The last characteristic is a relatively strong insulation of the press from political influence. The American press is considered a local monopoly press. The American Bar Association states. Interestingly, the same association also suggests that the rise of electronic media has led to an increasingly fragmented national audiences and the re-emergence of partnerships among readers. Next, I am going to discuss with you the globalization and the media in the Arab world. I would like to take a look at the media system of the Arab world, its development, and the local and global factors that influence it. Therefore, I will start with different theories that questions the importance of communication and media for globalization and vice versa. Connected with that is the question of the existence of a global communication network or global media. I will first say something about their characteristics, and I will try to apply this to the media in the Arab world to see in how far they are part of a global media evolution. I will give an overview over the evolving of mass media in Arab countries in the last 50 years, with concentration on print media, television, and the internet. I wouldn't say much about radio because it is more a leisure time activity to settle around a radio set than the medium having a particular political or social importance besides this. In the 50s and 60s, radio was the most used medium for people in the region, especially if they wanted to get international news. And it was a medium that didn't require special skills. People didn't even have to be able to read to use it. But with the mass introduction of television during the next 20 years, radio lost its importance for social change. I will later on say something about the censorship arrangements concerning print media, television, and internet. Before I will try to describe the influence media had on society and the influence global changes had on the media system in the Arab world. I use Arab world or Arab media as a summarizing terms, which doesn't mean countries with an Arab population and their media systems are homogeneous entities. I tried not to describe every system separate and look at every country, but search for differences and equal factors on a more general level to be able to analyze them in a global context. Media development in the Arab world has, for the last century, been entombed with special political and economic changes. Increasing education, urbanization, free market policies, and technological transfer opened the region for new forms of media. There is a theoretical basis on globalization in media. There are two different kinds of views concerning the importance and the potential of communication for globalization. Those who believe in its positive effects see the primary point of the potential and the fact that global communication is the basis for global economy. And in this field, especially the electronic communication, mass media, first and foremost the internet, are seen as motor to globalization. The problem with that thought is though that capital and technology are expanding way faster than the development of transcultural communication. That confuses the action reaction change of this theory. Global media only produces raw material that gets domesticated into the different national cultures. But the global communication network, if such a thing exists, is controlled by industrial nations whose press agencies develop this raw material and send to every media in the world. Some might call this cultural imperialism. The theory of cultural imperialism contains four elements. First is the exportation of media contents, for example, television programs and news. Secondly, foreign ownerships of media in third world countries, and with that control over the outlet of these media. Third is the transfer of dominating broadcasting norms and media commercialism into these countries. And the last is the invasion of a capitalist worldview upon indigenous societies. This theory sees a potential linkage between foreign policy and trusts, capital expansion, media infrastructure, and media content, and wants to disconnect the global capitalist system from media to have them reach autonomy. So it is questionable in how far one can accuse Western media of bringing a capitalist worldview into the societies in the Arab world. It did probably already exists there, because these societies are not isolated from the rest of the world. But the argument of transferring dominant norms of journalism is quite undisputable, because studies show that Arab media has tried to adopt a Western aesthetic in their own productions for some time. This goes along with the adaptation of Western standards for journalism as well. Right from the start, Egypt had a much more developed media system than other countries in the region, which made it easier for the Egyptian government to start and promote its views in other countries as well. Later, they tried to achieve the same with radio and television broadcast. During the chaotic time of the civil war in Lebanon, a significant degree of writers went into exile, many of them to Great Britain. Until today, a great number of publications, especially such being found by the Lebanese refugees, are being published in Europe, especially in London and Paris. I think it's enough for today. I will come up with a new topic in my next video lecture. Thank you for watching my video. Kindly subscribe my channel so that you can get my next video easily in your notification. Thanks a lot and best of luck.